Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this fifth edition of Conversations with Storytellers from the book Ordinary, Extraordinary African American Women as We Mature. Just so good to see all of you today. My name is Joy Pettit, and I am the sister of the author, Stephana Colbert, and I'm just going to begin the program with just a few housekeeping things. The first is that we're recording the event, so just know that you're being recorded. And as Brian just said, he was going to mute everyone during the course of the program. And then if you have questions as you hear the storyteller speak and hear their story, please put them in the chat because we'll be watching that throughout the whole program and we'll be able to go to those questions. And in fact, allow you to raise your hand. But one of the things we're going to do is Stephana is going to speak with both of the storytellers, Faedra and Andrea, before we take questions. So just if you have them and don't want to forget them, put them in the chat and we'll make sure we get to them. I would ask you all to just check out Jewel Jordan Publishing website because this month, during Women's History Month, if you purchase a copy of Ordinary, Extraordinary Women as We Mature, you'll also get a copy at half price of the first book, Ordinary, Extraordinary Women, The Elders, one of which is on our call today, June Davis. So just a promotion that we're doing during the course of Women's History Month. And finally, during the course of today's program, we're going to ask some Black History Month questions because as my sister says, we get 1 month, but really we should know our Black history always. And so there's going to be questions and it'll be the first person who answers the question in the chat will be the winner of a copy of the book. So again, I'm going to start with a question and hopefully someone will be able to answer this one. This jazz pianist and child prodigy accepted into Juilliard when they were 8 years old in 1950. This Black female is the first Black American to host her own TV show. Again, this jazz pianist and child prodigy accepted into Juilliard at 8. In 1950, she became the first Black American to host her own TV show. So answer in the chat. Somebody did, and we'll see if they're the winner because I'm not. So now I'll just introduce Stephana. Stephana attended Brown University and the Boat College of Law at the University of California at Berkeley. And she spent 30 years in the legal profession, first as a public defender in Denver, Colorado, and then working for different corporations in intellectual property law. But one of the things that I tell everyone is that her passion was writing. She's always been a writer. She took time to do that through her whole life. And so one of the things that we've been just so happy about is that she's followed this passion into writing, publishing, and telling stories. And so with that, I would like to introduce Stephana Colbert.
Thank you, Joy. And thank you for doing what you do. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I am so happy that you are all here with us today. This is all a little bit different, and it's the result of the pandemic, which hopefully we're getting out of sooner than later. But this virtual effort at celebrating the ladies in the book is I think, a good way to include more people, in fact. And so welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming. Let me acknowledge before I start that there are several other women from the book, As We Mature, with us today. Michelle Gaither is here. She waved and smiled. Beverly Pegues Tucker is here. Marilyn Robinson is here. And as Joyce said, we are honored to have June Davis here, who was both in the first book and also the catalyst for the first book. She is the person to whom I spoke that started this whole idea. She was telling me she and her husband, Dr. Leotis Davis, were in Oklahoma for a meeting, and we got into a conversation at dinner about her involvement in the civil rights movement while she was a student at Spelman, the same university, the same college attended by one of our storytellers today, Faedra Carpenter. In any event, I said to June, I think that you should tell your story. And her husband said, I've been telling June that. And so light bulb went on. I said, well, because she said, I don't want to do that. And I said, well, what if somebody else told your story? And she looked at me and she said, I'll think about it, which is similar to the response I get from many of the ladies I've contacted. Nobody wants to hurry up and tell their story because I think they, ordinary, extraordinary African-American women, they don't see themselves as extraordinary, although you all are. Not just the celebrants today, but everybody on this call. And so I talked to someone else, and June eventually said, okay. And the idea germinated. And so that's how we started with the first book, Ordinary, Extraordinary African-American Women, the Elders. So thank you, June Davis. This book is as we mature, women between the ages of 45 and 69. There is a third book, the Millennials, 25 to 44, and there will be a fourth book, young girls and young women, 12 to 24. So I did that because I think that we all should be celebrated. And so when people ask me why these books, the answer is what I just said, to celebrate us. Black women matter. It's significant that yesterday was the first anniversary of the killing of Breonna Taylor in her home while she was sleeping. And I think it's important that we not be invisible. And the way to do that is to tell our stories, to celebrate us, to make sure that we control our own narratives. And so as a result of that, I think these are the kinds of stories that we should tell. Remember Hidden Figures? No, we wouldn't have known about the contributions of Miss Johnson and all the other ladies in the book. In Hidden Figures, in the book and the movie, had it not been for an African-American woman whose father worked at NASA and knew about it. So I think it's really important that we control our own narratives. Today, we are celebrating Andrea Charlton and Faedra Carpenter, both of whom have thrived and survived the obstacles of their lives, both of whom attended HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. I want to emphasize that today because I think as we move forward in education, the importance of education continues to be something that we need to emphasize to our young people. HBCUs have provided opportunities and a safe haven for African Americans for a very long time. I want to give you a couple of facts. Let me also say there are 4 women in this new book that in addition that are the products of HBCUs, in addition to Andrea and Faedra. Tara Bradley, who we celebrated last week, attended Hampton University in Virginia, and Renee Gordon attended Cheyney State, which is now Cheyney University of Pennsylvania. A bit about HBCUs, and then I'll get into our conversations. In case you didn't know, there are 107 colleges in the United States that are identified by the U.S. Department of Education as HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. Some of the products of HBCUs, as I said, Katherine Johnson, Thurgood Marshall, W.E.B. Du Bois, and the latest, greatest example, Kamala Harris, our vice president. Spelman and Bennett colleges produce over half the nation's African-American women who go on to earn doctorates in all science fields. 9 of the top 10 colleges that graduate most of the African-American students who go on to earn PhDs are HBCUs. HBCUs have over a $10.2 billion positive impact on the nation's economy. So with that, I will introduce Andrea Charlton. Raise your hand and wave, Andrea. And I lost her, but Dr. Faedra Chatard Carpenter. Welcome to both of you. I am going to turn now first to Andrea because she said she wanted to be first, not because she wanted to be showcased, but because she figures we'll finish with her first quicker. And I've said to Andrea, this is a family, we embrace you, right? So you need not worry about anything or anybody. You're here because we want to celebrate you. So first of all, and I need you to unmute yourself. I want to ask you, Andrea, why did you agree to share your story?
So the
proposal, other than the fact that I asked.
Okay. The proposal came to me and I did ponder about it. Initially, yes, no, I did not want to share my story. I did not think my story was worthy to be shared. But as I went on, and I told you earlier that my Bible study fellowship leader is on here. One day in training, we were talking. She loves to play games, and we had a game going on, and we had to tell something that no one knew. And I shared it with her, and she was like, no, that's not true. And then I was like, I thought to myself that it's a lot of stuff. People just see you now and see the outside of you and assume that stuff was just flowing. You know, she didn't make a big deal about it or anything. She just said, no, we have to talk later. And so when the proposal came to me, I was like, you know what, this is the time for me to talk to someone. One, it would be a healing process for me. And two, it would be out there to help anyone else who has gone through some of the stuff that I've gone through, just to help.
And having listened to your story, Andrea, you know, it was with such appreciation that you shared it with us. And I agree on both ends. I think certainly it will help others. I do hope it has served as a healing process for you. I didn't say as we started, and I meant to say that Andrea is an accountant, Sunday school and Bible school teacher. And one of the important pieces that I learned about Andrea that we'll talk a little bit about is the champion of the underdog. And this from somebody who describes herself, and I'll turn to her story. How does a quiet, shy, studious youngster born in Jamaica find her voice and become a bold, unabashed champion of the underdog, whoever she sees and need? Such a transformation may happen for a variety of reasons. For Andrea Charlton, it happened after she was thrown into a fight or perish situation. Rather than perish, or at the least continue to be abused, ignored, and neglected, Andrea chose to fight. And in doing so, she became a leader, albeit reluctant, and turned a journey of despair into one of triumph and peace. The turning point in Andrea's life occurred with her naive decision to enter Job Corps. Naive because wanting to leave home and find a better experience, she believed everything the Job Corps recruiters told her. Andrea's voice. After graduating from high school, I was looking for a job. I knew I had to get out of there, the home of her mother and stepfather. When I went to the labor department to look for a job, the lady was telling me about Job Corps. She made it sound like I was going to go to a camp or something. They were advertising and saying I could learn a trade. That was my out. I could go to Job Corps. I would get paid to be there. They were going to teach me a trade. I thought it would be far better than my experience to that point. And then I got there and discovered that it wasn't camp. It was more like a prison. So Andrea, reflecting on that, one of the things that struck me was the transition that occurred as a result of your experience at Job Corps. And I know you told me that you don't say a lot about Job Corps, but can you reflect a little bit on what happened and how that transition from shy, quiet to I'm going to take care of me and anybody else that somebody is going to mess with? How did that occur?
And so before I answer that question, I want to let you know that no one on this panel today know of that timid Andrea. They find that hard to believe. But indeed I was. So once I got to Job Corps, it was just you're going to survive or you're going to die. And so I had to make the determination if I'm going to continue to be a doormat or just stand up for myself and do what I need to do, whether I live or die. And so I had to make a choice and do some, quick thinking and stuff, because once I got there, you couldn't leave within 90 days. And then just the stuff that was happening around me was scary. The other people who were there, some of the other people, the majority, were people who have been in trouble with the law and had been sent to jail. And so
as opposed to yourself, who had been an honor student in high school and very kind of naive and unexposed to a lot of other things.
Yes. And so, a decision had to be made, and it was made.
Well, the upside to that was that despite the downside that she describes in her story in the book, one of the things that Job Corps provided you was the opportunity to go to college.
Yes.
And I believe you said you had two choices. One was Huston-Tillotson and the other was?
Texas A&I.
And you decided on Huston-Tillotson.
Yes.
And why was that?
One, it was in Austin, and it was it was city compared to Texas A&I. And the other, when I got there, I saw people like me. And so I chose that. It was it was private, it was religious. And so I chose HT over A&I.
Now I want to read a little bit. One of the things, you indicated that your the head of your sorority chapter is here, and tell me your sorority.
Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, founded on the campus of Howard University in 1920.
And everybody who talks about sororities does so with that pride that you just expressed. But the other thing, so you joined the sorority. Andrea was student council president. This is a shy child, right? Andrea was student council president. She was a candidate for Miss UNCF, Miss United Negro College Fund. She was on the honor roll. She protected people by fighting with them, fighting with their detractors and so on and so forth, much to the chagrin of some of the administrators, but they still took care of you. And that's, I think, one important piece of it. I want to read an excerpt, Reflections on Huston-Tillotson College, an HBCU. Andrea has only positive memories of Huston-Tillotson College, not just because she was able to get her college degree there, but because of the friendships she made and how well she was treated by the other students, the faculty, and the administration. They helped her financially, got her out of situations, held her to high standards, and showed kindnesses and a side of the world that she had never seen or experienced before. Thus, Andrea's journey celebrates the nurturing nature of an environment like that of an HBCU, an environment where people around you, the community around you, irrespective of what your experiences have been, lift you up instead of tearing you down. Andrea's voice. Being a student at HT changed my world. Dr. King, Miss McCracken, Mrs. Marshall, she's now Dr. Marshall, were also helpful to me throughout my college career. Even Mrs. Marshall's husband, Dr. Marshall, whom I used to not like, guided me. The first time I met him, I was late for his class. His back was to the class and he didn't turn around. He just said, "Well, thanks for joining us, Miss Charlton. I hope tomorrow you can make it on time." I was embarrassed and just squeezed my fat ass into the chair. He was very good. Each of those professors were very good. Dr. Hicks was very good. She was so prim and proper. She didn't call you out loud, but would ask you to stay behind. She would say, "You're a young lady. You don't have to act like that. You don't have to have the last word. Do you understand what I'm saying, Andrea? You're a smart young lady. I'd say, okay, can I go now? She would say, no, you need to stand here and listen to what I'm saying. I liked all of them. So, I guess everything that I've just read to me seems to be a reflection of your experiences. Again, you say that they held you to high standards, but they took care of you. Speak a little bit about that.
So, and I didn't mention all their names, but I like that the atmosphere at HT, because not only it wasn't just in the classroom, it went beyond the classroom. If you didn't show up for class, they would come to the dorm to see why you didn't go to class. I went there with no funds, and so when I'm towards the end of the year, I would say, I don't know if I'm coming back. I don't know how to get here. And so I would be told things that I can do or how they could help me to stay, come back and be focused. So that was one thing that stood out. Not only you need to be in class, but if you're not there, they come and find you. Then stuff happening in the city, a play, a show, anything, they provide tickets for us to let us have that experience also. It was a family. Like you said, this here today is a family. It was a family environment. And that is something that I wasn't exposed to. So when people, even when I work with your sister Joy. And when I work with her, and she was like, oh, Andrea, you cannot say that. You cannot do that. And, I'm like, look, I'm not going to let anybody tell me what to do, when to do it, how to do it. I'm not going to do that. And so she'll pull me in her office and she was like, I'm not telling you can't do it, just in a different way. You can't just say what you want to say when you want to say it. So that kind of nurturing I'm talking about, they looked out for you. Whether you needed money, whether you needed advice, they just looked out for you. And I was glad that I chose HT, because I don't think I would get that in Texas A&I.
And you have paid it forward as well.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that. And I'm gonna that's gonna be my last question to you for a minute. So talk
for a minute. Faedra is ready to go now. So there is a lot of people in my past, in my present, and I'm sure in my future that has looked out for me, showed me the way, whether they call me out loud or just pull me to the side and tell me. So now I do the same for our young adults, in my sorority, our youth, in my church, our youth, and even for people that's older than me or my age. I just always look for a way to, how can I help you? If I see you in trouble, I'm not fighting anymore, Joy. I'm helping with the other knowledge that I've learned how to put the fight behind and just use the information I now have to help people to move forward.
The product of an HBCU. Now we will turn to, thank you, Andrea. That wasn't so bad, was it?
No, but let's go to Faedra. She's waiting.
Another product of an HBCU, who is our second storyteller today, is Dr. Faedra Carpenter. She is associate professor in the Department of Performing Arts at American University, a professional dramaturg, which we will talk about in a minute, and the author of the book Coloring Whiteness. Welcome, Faedra. And I guess my first question to you is the same as the first question to Andrea. Why did you agree to share your story?
Okay, thank you for having me here and having me part of this collection and being part of this community. And my answer is going to be very much like Andrea's. I did not want to share my story. And Stephana was very insistent. I was not always so cooperative. I would always postpone talks. And no, you really don't. I got some people you can talk to, I kept on telling her. And what eventually made me go ahead and do it is exactly this idea of the ordinary being extraordinary and vice versa, and challenging myself to, talk the talk and walk the walk. Because as an educator, I tell my students, to understand their power and their voice and their significance, and whatever sphere of life they're in, they're making an impact in invisible and highly visible ways. All of it counts. And so I thought, oh yeah, I should follow suit and practice what I preach a little bit.
So you're now, let me just back up just a little bit. You've just moved over to American. You've been there how long?
So I started teaching at American University this fall. So my transition aligned with the transition of pandemic time. Trying to.
So how has that been? Just teaching in the pandemic. What's that been like for you and your students?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not alone in this group as teachers and students. In fact, I see a couple of my students. Thank y'all for being here. It's challenging, right? Because one thing that's really important to me and that is part of my identity theme is this idea of community. And it is hard to forge and maintain connections sometimes with Zoom. But then, as we also know, there's gifts of Zoom. There's unexpected benefits of access and connection that you can't always, exercise when you're not on Zoom. So it's challenging, but I've been gifted at both places where I was, University of Maryland, where I am, American University, with really enthusiastic, invested folks. So it's working out okay.
Well, welcome to your students. I won't call them out. They may have questions for you as we move on. The name of Faedra's story is Finding Her Place. And when you read the story, you'll understand kind of more fully. But I think one of the things that impressed me was the connection to Spelman and how that helped her find her place. And so this first excerpt is called Her Place Among the Sisterhood. Her mother, let me say this as well, her mother and June Davis are friends, and they both went to Spelman. And so I believe her mother, as I recall your story, your mother wanted all of you all to go to Spelman.
Oh.
And you were resistant initially.
Oh, yes.
But then you went to visit.
But then I went to visit. Yeah, my mother went to Spelman. My father went to Morehouse. I'm one of these families, it's like 30 plus. Ms. Davis knows all these Spelmanites and Morehouse. And so when you hear that your whole life, you're like, I don't want to go there. I was going to go to Stanford or Brown or somewhere else. Right. But then my mom got real smart. She's like, you know what? I won't ever mention Spelman again. I just want you to visit on the weekend. And I won't ever mention it again. Went there, fell deeply in love with the campus, the people, did the very not smart thing of not applying anywhere else. Thank goodness I got in. So
let me pick up your story here. So after her visit to Spelman, Faedra knew she wanted to be part of the Spelman sisterhood. And her journey as a student at Spelman was broad and surprising and sweet and filled with nuances and twists and turns, from wearing long skirts, I'm probably mispronouncing this, let's just say in Birkenstocks, when she arrived on campus, to joining a sorority and graduating with a degree in English. She absorbed it all, and finally, at the end of her time at Spelman, began to find her place. But first, she was dazzled by the diversity of Spelman's sisterhood. Faedra's voice. Talk about every shade and size of Black women from all over the world, from every faith, ideology, and political affiliation. The absolute diversity of all these Black women was so refreshing, so magical, and they were all bringing it. They were all brilliant and fabulous, and I felt, oh gosh, I'm so lucky to be among them. They were affirming to me. I felt proud. I was rubbing elbows with all these women who I found so extraordinary, and I believed in the sisterhood, and I found sisterhood, and it was wonderful. While the college experience is different for each person, and being a student at Spelman is no different, for 18-year-old Faedra Chatard, her Spelman experience was really emboldening and affirming. It was everything she wanted it to be. It was so wonderful that shortly after she arrived, she excitedly called her mother, telling her all of the new friends she made, boldly asking if she could extend her college career. Faedra. I was loving it so much midway through my freshman year that I called my mom and said, "Mom, can I stretch it out? Can I do this in 5 years instead of 4?" I remember her laughing and me saying, "But I got like 8 best friends," which was so important to me, knowing my experience in grade school and junior high school and high school. And I remember my mother saying, "Okay, sure, you can stretch it out, but let's see how you feel towards the end." And she also said, "And Faedra, if you leave Spelman with one really good friend, you've done well." And today I have a lot of friends and amazing line sisters from Spelman, but I have one really dear, dear friend. And what a good friend she is. My mom was right. I did well. Ultimately, Faedra graduated in 4 years. So you didn't extend it out.
Yeah, but no, I quickly learned that I did want to finish up and enjoy my life, but certainly I laugh when I hear that because I remember viscerally, I remember feeling that excitement and connecting with so many people and thinking I wanted to stay there forever. But the part of the growth of Spelman also is teaching you, okay, but you got to go next steps, right? And certainly my juxtaposition was, as detailed in my story, I was raised in an environment where I was literally like definitely the only Black girl throughout my elementary school. And I think in the book, I say the only Black child. I remember later on, there was one of the diaspora child. He did not consider himself Black. And so again, I'm coming from parents who were always constantly, particularly my mother, instilling in me this idea of my identity and my culture. I think I was in 3rd grade. Again, the only Black girl and the only self-identifying Black person in the school, and they were doing projects like 3rd grade. And I come to my mom real proud. I say, "Mom, everyone's doing projects on a certain person, and I think I should do Abraham Lincoln because Abraham Lincoln, you taught me, freed the slaves." And my mother was like, "Okay, it's a little bit more complicated than that," right? And know who you should do? You should do Marian Anderson, right?
Oh, wow.
Right. So my mom's was constantly teaching me about that which is not just found in the day-to-day public history texts of the school I went to. And so constantly, negotiating that and trying to find a place, and a lot of issues because of just naivete or outright, racial intolerance. And then to come to Spelman, and as I said, all these amazing people, and feeling like I was lucky to be amongst them, but also that, again, there's no one single way to be Black. And Spelman sort of encompassed that, still with the sisterhood, but you could have your individuality, and there's not a monolithic sort of grouping of people. And so celebrating those things simultaneously was really exciting.
Let me get you to give a shout out to your sorority, because you mentioned it, and Andrea gave a shout out to hers.
Yes. So Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And I have to say, one of my line sisters is my front is there, Eve Graves, who's also a professor. And I should also, not to put her on the spot, but also a professor at an HBCU now. So Delta.
Now I'm gonna ask you one more thing before we open the questions up to the audience, because I want to give them a chance to ask you questions. I will move you forward. You graduated from Spelman in 4 years. You went on to get a master's degree. One of the things that I'd never heard of before that we talked about in our interview was dramaturgy. And and the idea that you, as I say, you're a professional dramaturg at this point, but I didn't know what that was. I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that part of it, okay? Dramaturgy. On her way to getting her master's in theater, with the help of 2 of her Washington University professors, and against the advice of her department chair, Faedra pursued an intern-style fellowship as a professional dramaturg. In doing so, Faedra was once again taking a risk to find her place professionally. I had taken a lot of scholarly academic classes to get my master's degree. However, the professors I bonded with in that program were not the ones that prioritized research-oriented scholarship. They were the practitioners, my playwriting professor and a directing professor. These two would have me doing projects and production-related research for them. Near the end of my second year in the master's program, when I was about to graduate, both encouraged me to apply to a dramaturgy internship in Washington, D.C. at Arena Stage, this big regional theater. After all, they told me, you have been working as a dramaturg. I had never heard that term before in my life. And they gave me this brochure and each offered to provide a recommendation. The program was called the Allen Lee Hughes Fellow Program, and they told me that the intent of the program was to bring diversity into the theater. They thought it would be a great opportunity for me. But the chair of the theater department strongly advised Faedra to skip the internship in DC and apply to graduate schools to get her PhD. Instead, she considered his advice, did more research into dramaturgy, interviewed for the Arena Stage position, and when they offered her the position, Faedra grabbed it. Faedra's voice. I was looking for real life experiences. I was like, but it's the real thing, it's life. It was a prestigious opportunity. They had flown me in for a multi-day interview and activities up against the other finalists, my competitor. I was there the whole weekend and they picked me. I felt like I had to take the chance to see where this opportunity could lead. And it has, you continue to do that, although you did ultimately get a PhD and you're teaching, you continue to do dramaturgy. So talk a little bit about what that is.
Sure. So I always say those who can make a really concise definition of dramaturgy probably haven't done a whole lot of dramaturgy because it's slippery. And depending on what institution, what production director, what task is at hand, the job of a dramaturg varies a lot. But for those of you who go to theater, for instance, if you ever have a program with a note, with an essay, oftentimes if that essay is not written by the director, it's written by the dramaturg. And the dramaturg, when theaters can afford it, because it's kind of like icing on the cake, when they can afford it, the dramaturg helps do research, social, political, cultural research about the context, the time. They help create and facilitate activities to bridge the theatrical production with events the theater might be having, post-show, pre-show discussions, actor packets they create. So, a director has the big vision. They have to look through a lot of things, but the dramaturg can help look at all the little details. So actor packets that can help actors understand what it felt like in 1943 at this particular time in this particular station. If you were domestic, and get research materials for that. Casting, they can help be an eye on the big picture, how things are literally being staged. So they're an informed sort of person who is just assisting with all those things. So here's an example. I just asked to be a dramaturg of something that's going into production for the summer. Does anyone know, like by hands, Steel Magnolias, the play or movie? Okay, so it was a play first, white cast. Then it was made into a movie with a white cast. Then some of you might know the Lifetime version, black cast. Okay, so that play originally, and through all those iterations, it's set with like a salon. It's a salon owner. So if you think of the white beauty salon owner and all that, great. And you think of the transposition to like a black salon, great. So, but both of those worlds might be different, right? They might have their own nuances. The repartee or the signs, the signatures of those lives might be altered and changed from the black salon if it's transposed to the white salon, or white salon to the black salon. This project that I've been asked to do, it's intentionally a multicultural cast. So it's saying a mixed salon. So now the director, who is white, is like, I think I need help. I want a cultural curator. I want a dramaturg. We have to explore that because that's something totally different. right? So how would a salon that is not rooted particularly in an Afrocentric African American context, but intentionally be, multicultural, how would that change the original interpretation or be different from an all Black interpretation? So as a dramaturg, I get to do research about what that might be, how that might impact, that vision might impact this production, and bring that in and be in dialogue with the actors. So that's an example of how that could work, if that makes sense.
And I can honestly say you were as excited about this new project as you were when you were telling me about being a dramaturg. And I just find it fascinating, first, because it was not something I was aware of. And secondly, now I look at theater in a different kind of way because I understand kind of the background and the people involved better than I did before.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So there's lots of other questions I could ask, but I want to now turn it over to the audience. But first, Joy, are you going to ask a question? Are you going to ask the Black History Month question, or are you going to, or should we just turn it over?
I can answer another question. I don't want to mispronounce the winner of our first book's first name, but it was Mrs. Lockley. And she won the first book. She immediately knew that the answer to that question was Hazel Scott. And it was the Hazel Scott Show, which again was something I wasn't aware of. So I thought it was a good question. Okay, and so here's the next. Who was a member of the Harlem Renaissance, an anthropologist and author of many books, including Their Eyes Were Watching God?
Hurry. Everybody should know that. And while we're waiting on that answer, let me open this up to the audience now. And I'd encourage you all to make this interactive. As you've seen, Andrea and Faedra's stories are extraordinary. Even though they both didn't want to do it at first and they said, oh, pick somebody else, they're extraordinary. These ordinary women who have extraordinary lives. So let's ask some questions. You can ask them in the chat, or you can ask them, you can just unmute yourself and ask them live. Don't be shy. Okay, we have to, is anybody asking in chat?
We don't have one in chat right now.
I have a question to ask of Andrea.
Andrea.
Andrea, I'm sorry. I apologize. Andrea, you did say that you attended Job Corps, and what I'm familiar with Job Corps is similar to what you said. A lot of people there have maybe had some experience with the Department of Corrections, and they may be dropouts and have other social ills. And my question to you is, how did you navigate that environment with all of this? And it might have been very, very different from the environment in which you grew up in.
Michelle, I should have talked to you before this. No question. Anyway, it was, you know what? It was just do or die. You could not be timid. You could not just stand back and watch. You just had to do what you had to do to get back, to get out. You know, be friends with everyone. But when the time come and, you know, it's like everyone from New Orleans was together as a group. All the New York people was together as a group. Just, you know, it was just that. But then at some point, the violence starts. The I'm picking against you and da 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 da. And so you just need to align yourself with a group and be faithful to that group, which I found in my life. Whatever group I align myself with, I become faithful. I don't know if I got that from Job Corps or what, but when I came to college and I don't even want to say I seek out seek out sororities. I think they seek me out. And as Stephanie said, I didn't see the worthiness of someone seeking me out, but it happened and I chose the one that I thought I best fit with. So, it's just survival of the fittest. I'm going to survive whichever way I can survive, the best way I can survive. And sometimes just being gentle is not the best way.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Andrea, so talk a little bit about how your life experiences, and you do have you have had an extraordinary life with some really nuanced and robust experiences. How has that helped you to be a mentor to others, or when you go about counseling, other people, whether they're women in your sorority or just people that you meet in the workday world? How does that influence how you go about giving counsel?
So I draw on my entire life experience. Even I said earlier that I'm in a BSF, I'm in church, I'm in the community. And so I normally just sit back and see, because sometimes people don't think that you see what they're doing. So I sit back and wait, and then usually the person they're picking on or the weaker person was me as a child, as a young teenager. And since I'm no longer that young person, I will step in and speak for that person, whether they ask for it or not. I love to volunteer my service, as Joy could tell y'all. And so I draw from where I came from to where that person is, and I can see the meekness or the scariness or whatever it is that you see into that person. And so what I've gone through and where I am now, I can share that. I don't have to go into details. I tell you, my BSF leader, when they asked the question and I said it, she doesn't know how much it affected me that she did not draw a conclusion. She was like, oh, girl, we have to talk some more. And we never did talk anymore. And so I don't think it changed her opinion of me, which was also one reason why I did not mind sharing my story after many, many, many tries.
Thank you.
And can I just say, I'm in BSF with Andrea. So we've known each other for several years, and I can attest to that. Everything she has been through has just honed her for this role she's in now to other women. She helps them. She has the hugest heart, just loves them and shepherds them so well. And it has just grown her, and God has used her and used these circumstances and her past to move forward and help so many other women. And we love her. I love you, Andrea.
Love you, Lisa.
You got to unmute yourself, Marilyn.
I have a question for, is it Dr. Carpenter?
Yeah.
You mentioned something about your experience at Spelman, that you saw women of all shapes and sizes and colors and the skin tones that impacted you. And in light of Meghan Markle not being white enough or whatever, how's that influenced everything for the rest of your life? What did it feel like to be there? You shared a little bit about that, but then going forward, how does that impact now? And when you see other women of color or African-American women who are not just one skin tone, one type, how does that inform what you do and how you live your life now?
So that's a really good question, especially the Meghan Markle. I'll have to admit, I saw it on the Yahoo strip really quickly that I guess Candace Owens or somebody was criticizing her, that she's not dark enough. I guess the critique is that. Yeah, and I was like, okay, so let's go to African American History 101 and talk about, starting from Jamestown and the intermixture and indentured servants versus enslaved people, and just the machinations of our history, the motif and narrative of the house slave and the field slave, and how that's been used as a weapon that's divisive and not really the truth always, these distinctions. So all that to say, I think like in the book, being where I lived, I was the Black person. And so being around white people, they did not see me as being, less Black. I was the NIGGER. I mean, that's who I was. And my parents, and maybe that's about them, but also where we were, the whole color consciousness thing, they never discussed any kind of valuation on the color spectrum. So I never understood that kind of terminology and those kind of understandings until I lived in Florida for a couple of years. And then I found it really odd that people didn't automatically know and recognize that I was Black. They thought I was something else, but not Black. And going through that was really hard. And that's why going to Spelman was so wonderful, because I understood who I was. I understood the sense of self my parents instilled, but not being identified in that way consistently was odd. Spelman, all that was taken away. Now, how does that affect me? It is part of my identity theme, because part of the research and writing I do focuses on narratives of community, but also specifically color consciousness. So with the question with Zora Neale Hurston, I got real excited because I was like, I know that. One thing about Zora Neale Hurston that was really interesting is issues of color difference, skin color, color complexes actually are featured in her works a lot. So we might know that novel, for instance, Their Eyes Are Watching God and Janie, right? But in her plays also, she interrogates how these sort of false divides are created. They're formed by racism. And then that racism is infectious and then begets intra-racism. And so Zora really explored that a lot. So in my writing, it's a topic that I have frequented. And certainly questions of authenticity and being real and being in or out that I work through in my academic work, I'm sure the seeds are growing up, and having to face that, particularly when I left Bothell, Washington, where I left. Yeah. So
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
I just wanted to say, and Zora Neale Hurston is my sorority sister. So shout out, Joy. Thank you for her.
Okay, I have a question. I have a question of Miss Faedra. Because you did make an ultimate selection to go to an HBCU, who do you imagine you would have been had you gone to a majority university? What would have been left out of you or would have been added to you had you gone to a majority university?
Good question.
Oh, Ms. Michelle, that's a good question. I don't know. Actually, I find that a little frightening, to tell you the truth, because I don't know why I feel emotional, but Spelman gave me such a sense of self and such a sense of sisterhood. And what was so important, and I'll say I have a 17-and-a-half-year-old son who is a senior and needs to figure out where to go. And we spread things out far and wide. He has a network of choices. He's leaning towards an HBCU. He's also a basketball player. We'll see how that fits in. But I feel like, looking at my experience, I can understand why it would be so fruitful for him in particular. Everyone's different. Everybody's different. I have a daughter who's 13, and she may not need to go to an HBCU the way I needed to, and the way I think would be of assistance to my son. They're different people. But for me, I needed a place that, and I say this as a teacher too, that's taught in different venues in different types of schools, that expected excellence from me, right? They expected it and demanded excellence from me, and would understand my holistic self. And I am a teacher at American University, which is a PWI, predominantly white institution. I attended Stanford University for my PhD. I've been to these different places and they have wonderful resources and things. But for me, I needed a place where I had that sense of community. And I don't know where I would be. I don't think I would have cultivated my voice and my sense of presence in the same way. I needed to not be like exceptional, like for the Black girl, right? I was just exceptional, like all the other people around me, to know that, you know, Black brilliance is real. And so, I don't know. So hard for those of us who went through that, you know, it's so hard to put it in words, but I just think the sense of self and community and confidence and my holistic self that may not have been recognized at a PWI for me.
Faedra, so your experiences certainly are out of the norm for a lot of Black women, just because you have had that encouragement from beginning to current day. I mean, you've had people who've been your coaches and your champions. But I would be real surprised if you have never had an opportunity or been in a situation where you felt marginalized in your career growth or just even in your educational opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, if that's happened, and if it hasn't, that's great. But if that has happened, and how it made you feel, and how you addressed that.
Yeah. So, definitely. It's not all been rainbows and butterflies. Y'all can read the excerpt. A great point is when Stephana was reading the part about me trying to figure what I wanted to do. Oh, I wanted to be dramaturg, and I wanted to, you know, do. And the reason why the director and the playwright, when I was getting my master's, the director and the playwright were invested in me, but all these scholars during my master's at the school I went to for my master's, they didn't believe in the work I was doing. And I was always writing like on Amiri Baraka or Black arts movement. And they were always poo-pooing it. They were always diminishing it. And just thought the things I was interested in writing, African-American culture, was not valid and significant, to the point that even when I wanted to go to Stanford, the one person who, a white Jewish Emmy award-winning theater scholar, had been my mentor, and I told him I want to go to Stanford and I want to focus on African-American culture and theater, and he said, "Oh, no, Faedra, you're too smart for that." He actually told me that I did not want to ghettoize myself, and that I wouldn't really make it in academia and do well, and I should do Shakespeare. And I am not an aficionado of the Bard. I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm just not. And so that was one of my greatest, clearly not a professor from Spelman, this is post-Spelman, but professionally one of my greatest mentors. And that's what he told me. And I had to break away from him. I was like, no, I'm going to go to Stanford. I'm going to do this. And what I say is, thank goodness. Thank goodness. And so thank you for that. Is it Winnell? Is it Winnell? Thank you for that, because I have been really lucky with isolated and select champions. And I've had those others. But I'm looking on this and I see my PhD advisee, Jeannie Lockley, and I see my undergrad advisee now at American University, Nia Mays, these extraordinary Black women at different phases. And so my mission now is to be sure that I'm the champion. And if they ever come across someone like that other person I told you about, I'm there to be like, what's your story? Believe in your story, keep it going. So, pushing it forward. That's what I try to do with my students now. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Other questions? I'm mindful of the time and mindful of the fact that we're about to hit an hour, but
I think there's a question in the chat from Beverly Pequise Tucker. And it kind of goes with what just was asked. And how do you see your training as a dramaturg? helps you make the African American culture real and meaningful?
So real and meaningful. I think I offer an opportunity as a dramaturg to be a bridge builder and a dialogue engenderer, right? I don't like things that are all wrapped up in a bow, and no play and no program note is going to answer all the questions, but oftentimes I'm in a position to help facilitate conversation for people in the audience, right? And we don't have time to get into any anecdotal details, but I think that's what I can do, right? And it's about being a cultural curator, and sometimes it is about telling a director, particularly if the director is, oftentimes I'm working with white directors directing Black plays. This has happened often enough, and things might be misinterpreted, things might be amiss, and it's an opportunity for me to interject ideas or perspectives and bounce it out. Like, for instance, recently there was something about casting I was dealing with, and one of the actors was saying, well, would it be really right for so-and-so to be cast? Because going back to skin color, the question, could a brown skinned woman, Black woman, have a darker skinned Black baby? Really? like, really? So in a poised but gracious way, I could be like, let's talk about, we come out all kinds of ways. Let's talk about the realities of our rainbow, right? So it can be as innocuous and small as rectifying those sort of perceptions, but it can also be about bringing forth the culture and the history and the nuances that people may not see. And that goes Black and white. None of us know everything. I'm learning. I'm sitting here learning from y'all today, so being in dialogue.
So I'll ask Andrea one last question, and I think we're going to finish up because we are past the hour. One of the things that I've noticed in a lot of the stories of the women that I've shared in the first two books is a sense of faith. And I know, Andrea, one of the things that you emphasized throughout a lot of your story was your faith and how your faith carried you through a lot. I want you to just reflect or talk a little bit about your faith and we talked a little bit about it already, but how that has guided your path, gotten you over some of the very difficult times you had as a child, as a teenager. And now it's kind of almost like it is a joy for you. So I guess I'm gonna stop rambling lest my sister tell me to be quiet. So that's my question.
So it's funny, this year in my Bible study, my BSF Bible study, we're studying Genesis, which really made a clear path for me for this question. Anyway, while I was going through, I did not have an idea that, someone is guiding me through this. It's a higher power than me. And as I've gone through, where I am today is where I was supposed to be, because it was just by the grace of God that I'm here. The people I've encountered, the people who have wrapped their arms around me afar and close, it was by God's grace that this happened. It wasn't anything in Andrea's power or even the people around me and their power. It's just by grace, God's grace, and my faith, because I could have stumbled and be on another side where I would be telling a different story today, or someone may have been by my graveside saying, oh, you could have been. But God see fit to make me sit here today to say, I am here. I have not gotten to where he wants me to be yet, and I don't know where that is, but he's taken me through step by step, and each struggle, each high, each low is what he wants me to go, because he doesn't want me to ever get in a conversation that says, oh, look what I did. So it's going to always be by faith I'm where I am right now.
All right, this has been wonderful. Let me thank you both. I know, and I'm going to thank Dr. Carpenter. I know she has to leave. Thank you so much. We're going to wind this up, but thank you for being here, for being a part of this conversation, for agreeing to share your story. And who knows, we may have another opportunity to converse about all of this again. So thank you so much. And we want to thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you all. And thank you, Andrea, sharing this space with me. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephana. Thank you for this book, for all your books, for highlighting these women. Thank you for your work and labor and your whole team, your whole fantastic team. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I guess I want to thank you all for being here. Is there any other comment or question that anybody has for Andrea?
Stephana?
Okay, so I want to thank the audience. Anybody, the link to this live event and recent interviews will be both on our website and on YouTube. In addition, we found out yesterday that, and the link is on the in chat, that the Black monthly newspaper African American Voice, which is the brainchild of Beverly Pegues Tucker's husband, James Tucker, has also highlighted us on his newspaper site. And so I encourage you all to look there as well. We have one launch left. It's next Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, and it will feature Marilyn Robinson and Beverly Pegues Tucker, both of whom are here and both of whom are women of the cloth. So I envision an interesting and exciting conversation. As I've told you all before, the book is available in all formats on our website as well as on Amazon. The ebook is on Amazon. One thing I mentioned was the third book about the millennials. If you all, we are moving forward with that book at this point, and we hope a release date will be in 2022. But anybody who has someone they would like to recommend as a celebrant for that book, or the final book, as a matter of fact. But anybody, you can go to info@JewelJordanPublishing.com and provide that recommendation, and just tell us a little bit about why you think that person would be a good fit for the book. I've already received a couple of recommendations as a result of these conversations. And so if you have a recommendation, please provide it. Thank you, Joy, Brian, Ginger, and Winnell, for helping us get this process going today and finished. Thank you most of all again to Andrea Charlton and Faedra Carpenter. Anybody have anything else y'all want to say? Please do. If not, thank you all for being here. Stay safe, wear your mask, and if you have the opportunity and are so inclined, please get vaccinated. Blessings.